Buy 6 Bitcoin right now, hold it for 20 years, it'll be worth about $100 million.
My name's Schebesta. Sold my first company for 1.5 mil when I was 26.
We're a comparison service. Our goal and our belief is to better all the world's decisions. We started in Australia, and now we're doing that in the US, the UK, and we're expanding to another 10 countries around the world.
Go outside, go and sell your TV, and go and buy a bunch of books, and I bet you'll make $1 million in 5 years' time.
We're more informed than ever before. We've got more at our fingertips, more to consume.
This technology is actually impossible to stop. We're going to see some structural unemployment about to happen.
Fred, you are known as a visionary. You spend a lot of time thinking, a lot of alone time thinking, a lot of time thinking at work. With this time that we're all going through at the moment with a lot of change, we're leaving the industrial times and we're moving into the digital times, and there's AI agents and there's Bitcoin. Where is your thinking at right now with this transition that a lot of industries are going through, and what you're thinking, first of all, for your businesses, and then also on a more broader scale as well?
Yeah, it's definitely something that's on my mind. I think the biggest trend that's going to happen is that companies are going to shrink by, I'd say, 80%. Most people that were analysts or they took notes, or they summarized something or reported on something or gathered something together and then redistributed it in some other way, shape or form. I think that roles that can leverage AI and be a centerpiece of moderation will remain. And I think that the overall macro trend is we're going to see some structural unemployment about to happen in a very widespread manner. And it'll just it's like it'll slowly heat up and get hotter and hotter until you'll see new systems roll out where entire divisions of people will no longer be needed. I think it's going to be a very big upheaval about to happen. And the haves and have-nots, again, will get even steeper in most countries around the world. And it won't be an even distribution. I think there will be AI that's more powerful that some people will have access to. Other people will have less powerful AI access. And that'll determine their ability to go and do things. It's not going to be an even distribution around the world. Nor has the world been ever an even distribution. And I think that money will continue to get more and more digital. And, we're already seeing governments and whole companies buying Bitcoin and strategic reserves around the world. Digital gold is becoming a more than a meme. It's becoming a reality where the institutions now are buying more than the retail customers were and could. And I think this is a moment in time where, again, the haves and the have-nots, the changing of hands of who owns what is happening right now. This is a major upheaval and changing of our time. I think the other thing that potentially will happen is that the US dollar will no longer become the global reserve currency. And I think that's about to change. I don't think it's going to happen overnight, but it's one of those things like Khrushchev said, slowly and then all at once suddenly. But I do think that's about to happen. In terms of relative scale, I think it's looking more and more likely. And I think that the place where innovation, I think, will start to happen is in the land of atoms. So we've been focused on electrons for the last, say, 20 years and optimizing those and packaging them and digitifying them and carrying them around cheaper and for longer. And what I think we're missing out on now is the land of atoms, where you move things faster, you move things more efficiently, you gather things more effectively. And I think that's where, cross interplanetary stuff happens. I think we need it once we tap into an asteroid or another planet with a whole bunch of gold. I think we'll see very quickly that gold is actually not that rare. and a whole bunch of other minerals that we think are rare, but I don't think they're actually not that rare from a universe perspective in the quantities that we need them. Moving in the world of atoms. So in other words, the other part of atoms is organic matter. So us being organic species, I think that's going to be challenged as to what is human, how much digital and how much technology and how much robotic needs to remain or is included in a human before it's no longer, a human. I think that's probably the key place where innovation will start to happen in organics and in atoms.
With the haves and have-nots, and 80% of workforce is potentially going, how is that going to look in 3, 4, 5 years' time? Like what? That sounds to me like a really, really difficult period for a lot of people. How do you see that?
I think like America and Australia and, a lot of countries are service-based businesses. That people provide services to other people. Small businesses are, still there's 6 million small businesses in Australia, and they're the large quantity of employers, and the base wage that the bottom minimum wage you pay someone, and obviously employing people is expensive now. It's very expensive, and so if you can optimize that role, and I think what small businesses will do is they'll be an army of agents with 40, 50, 60, 100,000 even agents and one person that does things. And I think that a lot of the services that people use to go and talk to other people about and work with them on are being really commodified. We at Finder are making, we have people full-time on AI video, full-time using, doing AI and writing, and it's, coding is all done with AI here. Like that's just natural. It's like all companies will evolve to that. If you're writing code right now, I don't know who's writing code still, but that's just not, reality. So I think what you'll get is a lot of those people, there are jobs, unfortunately, that they have-nots will do, which are more in the world of atoms, where you can't digitally move something. You can't move something because it's not digital. You need to move something from A to B, like an Uber driver. Really, you still need someone, or maybe you don't even need the driver, but someone's got to fix the car. Someone's got to, there's the land of the world of atoms is still a place. Unfortunately, it's not as fruitful a place to go and make money. Well, I guess there are people who can, but and do, but it is going to have a flooding of people that go and join it because the digital world is eating itself and becoming even more digital. So I do think you can participate still in that economy to remove doubt. Like you can compete and build an edge and find a domain specialty to remove doubt. It's very possible, and it should be done. It's how I think people will compete and actually join that economy. And there are always going to be valuable parts in it that are not that easy. So anything that has to interface largely with a human, where it's very, very high touch, I think that's where people will come in. And I think a lot of that comes down to relationships, about areas where you need deep trust, like really deep trust, where it's unquantifiable amounts of trust. And I think that those things are where humans do well. But I think that this idea that, the AI can't do this, or it doesn't feel like the writing is real or the video is real, that'll all get better and better and better and better to the point where you'll have no idea. And there are largely times now where we can't tell here where it is AI or it's not. Like it's getting too close. You know what I mean? Like it's getting real close. What is it going to mean? Yeah, I think it's a big upheaval coming. Big upheaval. Like do you remember the music industry just got completely upended
Yep.
by Napster and all that?
Yeah.
That's what's happening.
Yeah.
That's what's going to happen in the digital jobs arena.
So, Fred, what advice would you give someone who's listening to this, who maybe is in one of those jobs that's replaceable by AI? What would you say to them?
Learn to use the tools
Yep.
and become the prompter, not the prompted.
Yeah.
That's a good line. Prompted to leave. And we have a lot of people like that, where they're quickly adapting and evolving and they're changing what they do. Because you have unique domain expertise. You have unique skills and understanding that's not quite fully embedded into the prompts. And you can write about things and you can contextualize things. So I think a lot of the really great video and AI graphics people are photographers and artists that know how to give the creative direction that takes a long time to go and learn. And when you realize what's the part that's missing, what's the context that's needed that you have, if you can contextualize that and boil that into templates and things like that, then you can really clean up right now as well. There's still a lot of organizations and businesses that have doing stuff very, very manually.
Yeah.
And I think there's a good, there's hay to be made right now, if you know what I mean. But that, crop has a fixed amount of supply.
Yeah, of course.
And then you're going to be competing, but I think in that journey, what I'd suggest is that you're going to learn things and skills and places to compete upon that others are not even aware. That's where the battleground is. And I think you're going to be one step ahead.
Fred, you are a visionary. You're able to see into the future. When you were younger, you jumped into crypto. You're one of the first high-profile people to jump into crypto. Where does that come from? When you were younger, what were you doing? Why do you think this way?
So both my parents are very intelligent people, and that's a great thing. But it's also a very challenging thing as a kid when you're trying to be, right and prove someone else wrong, right? Like they're always right and they're really smart, so they're always really right. And you don't want to be wrong all the time. You want to try and be right and they're wrong. Mm-hmm. I don't know why that is. That's probably innate and something in my nature that I enjoy. Or everyone likes to be right in some way, but you want to bring something to the table, right?
Yeah.
And so I would always have to go to the new ground to win an argument. If we were treading over existing territory, I'm going to lose, right? Because they've read it in a book and they've tried it and they're older than me and they're just more experienced, right? Whereas if I go to the new territory, new map, new things, what I learned to do is learn really fast, get ahead really quickly, and win. And I think that's sort of the behavior that I was naturally, it sort of came out from that. I don't know whether the full circle necessarily played out, but what I observed in life, and I got rewarded for doing this in multiple places, is if I did that in other areas, if I found something, learned about it really quickly, got ahead, I tended to have an advantage. And I did that in building websites and things like that as well. And I just saw crypto as this whole new thing. I'm like, wow, look at this whole new space. We've got to get into this. We just got to get into it. Like it's I don't think this is dying. This is not going away. There's a lot of people here, and this technology is very difficult to stop, actually impossible to stop. So much so, it's much like BitTorrent, right? BitTorrent still not closed down. You can't close it down. It's like whack-a-mole. And so I thought, well, we better latch onto this one, And it's very rare in financial services that anything new happens. Remember that.
Yeah.
And if there's just very rare. It's super rare that anything new happens, right? The credit card was in the 70s. You go back to the 50s even with the local ones, but they're only relatively new inventions, right? Internet banking sort of happened maybe 20 years ago, 30 years ago. computerization of the bank probably happened 40 years ago. These are things which, they're just sort of incrementally improve things, but actually revolutions, right? It's like whole financial system changing things, like when people went from bartering to currency, like when you could borrow money digitally through institutions and have like a credit score and have like a system, right? These are like foundational changes. And I saw, okay, this is pretty early, right? Like cryptocurrency and Bitcoin and blockchains and how they operate. And early on, it was a bit confusing. But what I saw was a marrying of finance, tech, and marketing mixed together with an immutable hard money that no human could go and change without investing, $1 trillion years, or something like that to go and crack it. And, that's going to take a while. But I think that I saw the potential of a new financial services system, like the system, the foundation changing.
And Fred, can you explain that system of how, like for someone who isn't as familiar, and we've spoken to quite a few people about cryptocurrency and Bitcoin, and it is really difficult to get your head around this new system. How would you explain it to someone in the simplest term?
I could start with Bitcoin, maybe, because that's probably
the easiest,
the centerpiece of, I think it's 65% of the whole cryptocurrency market. And some people believe it's the only blockchain that should exist. And, I don't think there's any reason why you can't start others, but it's certainly, it's one that I love and I believe in. That's why I've got my my Bitcoin ring as well.
I love it.
And I think very simply, if I was to break it down, is that, everyone has a bank account. And when you transfer funds from one person to the other, it's logged on a ledger. And that ledger is the Bitcoin ledger. In the beginning, the way it was, evenly distributed was that people went and mined it. And what does mining mean? It just means you prove that the ledger is correct. And anytime that, we would say I was to transfer you a Bitcoin, Sonia, it would just log that ledger and the miner would just tick it off.
Okay.
And that's essentially how the system works, right? So that same system works today, but just the banks keep an account of that. They have their own ledger. They literally have a ledger. Like I've built one of these. It's a debit and a credit and everyone has a little account. It's exactly the same.
Yep.
It's just that a company does that. Whereas there's no company, there's no one to call, there's no helpline, no support line to call. It's just a system that's running in a whole series of computers in a decentralized way, and it just keeps a track of that ledger. And that's all that matters, is that ledger and who has what.
So you've got a theory, the rainbow theory, when it comes to investing in crypto and Bitcoin. Can you explain that for us? And when is the right time to buy and when is the right time to sell?
Oh, it's great. You've seen one of my videos of recent. Yeah. It's So there are several graphs I use, but that's probably the main one. Is there's a Bitcoin rainbow graph, and what it does is it sort of says when Bitcoin's really undervalued and when it's really overvalued. And the mathematics of how that comes together is pretty intense. So, but the shorthand of it is that every 4 years in Bitcoin, half of the mining reward is no longer paid out. So there's less and less supply coming out every 4 years. And so that means there's less supply. But let's say if the demand is the same, if not more, then generally when demand is greater than supply, the price goes up. And this is what this graph basically talks about. And sometimes that gets really hyped up, like it gets really crazy, when Bitcoin hit $20,000 in 2017 or, hit 65,000 in, I think it was 21 or 22. And recently, it's hit 111,000 this year. 111,000, by the way, I wouldn't say is necessarily super hypey. If you look at the graph, it's actually, we've got a long way to go. But basically, if you type that into Google, or you can watch my video, it's very simple. You just follow the colors, and if the color is really down the bottom, you buy, and when it's really at the top, you sell. And if you just follow that, you do pretty well.
Is it possible just to buy and hold? I mean, if you buy and hold for 20, 25 years like we did with property, can you do the same, or should you be
100%.
looking? Yeah.
You buy 6 Bitcoin right now, hold it for 20 years, I reckon it'll be worth about $100 million.
Six Bitcoin will be worth $100 million in 20 years' time.
Yeah.
Wow.
Wow. Yeah. It feels like a much better investment than a house.
I think you got to remember the difference between a house and a Bitcoin is the number of buyers that can potentially buy the asset you've got. So like with a house, you're looking at the local market, right? So the people who are around it. You're looking at maybe a few of the suburbs that are around it as well. And then generally, some outside buyers from overseas. But what were you talking about? Like max peak target audience of 200,000 people that could potentially buy your house or would potentially be interested in it, given the local constructs and constraints of how you're going to market it and where people are going to come from and what people are interested in. Whereas with Bitcoin, every country around the world has a denomination of Bitcoin and their local currency, and there are exchanges all around the world in countries. So your target audience is in the billions of people, and that's what's so remarkable. It trades 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. It doesn't turn off. The stock market starts at 10:30 and ends at 4:30 in the afternoon. You most time it's actually closed. And they have like holidays and stuff.
Yeah, Bitcoin's not taking a holiday.
Yeah. The Bitcoin ain't taking no holiday. Like, I think Prime Minister Albanese is pretty happy about everyone taking holidays right now as well. But the target audience is so big.
Yeah.
So big.
Yeah.
It's and if you think about a stock in a country, like a single stock in a country, even those can be tough for other countries to purchase. It's just not that easy. Whereas Bitcoin, everyone can locally, they have some way to go and access that in some way, shape, or form. And that makes it, target buyers are enormous.
I worked for a global podcast tech company for a while, through 2020 through to 2022. And that was my first experience working outside of Australia. And one thing I noticed working in that company was that Australia is a fair way behind the Northern Hemisphere. In a lot of ways, in that company in particular as well. How do you see Australia? Do you see that we lag behind markets like the US, the UK, Dubai? What are your thoughts on Australia?
I have some pretty controversial views about Australia right now. I think that their most recent election to me is puzzling. I thought people would want to take matters into their own hands and go and solve their own problems. But what I realized was that most people in Australia want to go and give the government the power and get them to go and solve their problems for them. So, instead of making the government smaller, I think they're looking to make the government bigger, tax people more, get the government to share the money around. Like, this is a very socialist nation. I'd say it's closer to China than it is America.
Wow.
It's closer to Vietnam than it is America. Yeah, there is some capitalism here, but this is not the land of opportunity like it used to be in the 70s and the 80s, where people would give things a real crack at things. This is a highly taxed, highly litigious, continuously getting more litigious nation, and where people want more taxes. They're voting in people who want to bring in more taxes. It's like a lent-in socialist nation. That's what Australians like. They like lots of government. They want the government. When we have a problem, the first thing an Australian does is go, "Oh, what's the government doing about it?" Not, "What am I doing about it?"
Yeah.
And that's the difference, right? And in the Northern Hemisphere, a lot of countries, the difference to me is a lot of countries had to fight for their ability to go and say what they wanted to do. We never fought. Still have a stamp on our flag of someone else's stamp on our flag that we pay money and call our king. And there's no challenge to that. No challenge. The last challenge was the Eureka Stockade, and it was gunned down because people just didn't want to fight that hard. Not as many people wanted to rise up. If that happened in America, which it did, then there was an entire war, a war of independence. And luckily the French went and saved America, which was a very lucky and not lucky, but Americans, in this world, about risk, right? Taking risks and that's what really luck is, that they came to that aid. Otherwise, the English were just wiping out the Americans, unfortunately. But when the French came and they turned that war around, and I think if we valued our land in that way, if we appreciated it, I think it would greatly change the way which we think about how we vote, what laws we bring in, what's important, how to get out of problems, how to solve them, whether the government should solve them or private enterprise should solve them. Because, largely the debate, which is puzzling to me, is about climate change, when Australia is literally such an insignificant amount of the greenhouse gases produced in the world. We're so insignificant compared to these major other countries. It's not really a thing. And our land mass is so massive compared to and the puzzling part to me, here's the other puzzling part, is that we have all this oil and all this gas that we ship. And there are companies from overseas that come in and mine this as well. We send this overseas, and yet a country exactly the same as us, even smaller, Norway, does that, taxes them and charges them more fees, and is an extremely prosperous nation with a huge sovereign wealth fund. And the thing is, Australia could do the exact same thing. It's just that there's huge amounts of political pressure stopping that in Australia, right? There's huge amounts of political pressure that stop the amount of money that goes. Yes, those companies pay a lot of tax, but they really should pay much more royalties and a whole series of other things, because a lot of them aren't even Australian companies. I think if that changed, if we went and took the biggest industry of our entire nation and turned it into a huge wealth fund of Australia, we would become one of the most prosperous nations on this planet.
Yeah, there's a bit of a trend that's happening in the UK at the moment with a lot of the digital entrepreneurs that are realizing that they don't need to base their company any longer in the UK. They can go and move it to a more tax-friendly place and run their company from those places. Do you think that's a trend that we're going to see here in Australia as well, when we are taxed highly here? So therefore, those digital businesses that this business, if we put these two chairs in another country that was more tax friendly, and we ran that business from another place, do you think we're going to see a bit of that trend happening for more nimble businesses?
Definitely. There's like an exodus happening already. People are leaving, they're going to Dubai, and they're going to Singapore, they're going to Hong Kong.
Yep.
And those countries are very friendly, they're very embracing of it. That will be the norm. And people will spend half the year, less than 6 months in Australia, and they will just live in these other countries, or even not bother and just exit, because it's just so unfriendly and so it just doesn't compete, where it's so easy to be global now.
I want to ask you, obviously you're well known for starting Finder. Can you take us back to when you first came up with the idea? And how did you do it without any investor backing?
Funny, I've been reflecting on this a bit. I did a lot of experiments on the internet by myself, and I could code. So that's probably a skill, which was a rare skill before AI.
Yeah.
And so a lot of it, I just built it myself. A lot of it, I just coded things and I wrote things and I put them on the internet. And I could do very basic design as well, because I used to run a digital marketing agency. That was my first company. And so teaching myself those skills, I think, were very good. And I think anyone learning skills right now is always key. I think, if I was to say, if there's one tip to anyone right now listening, go outside, go and sell your TV and go and buy a bunch of books, 10 books, and I bet you'll make $1 million in 5 years' time. Read those 10 books, sell your TV, you'll have $1,000, and go and put the other $800 after you've bought all the books into whatever idea you come up with after reading those books. I bet you'll make $1 million in 5 years' time. Reading is rare. Reading is so rare right now, and there's so much knowledge in reading. So I do read, and I used to read back then, and the way in which I learned about it was I actually read a lot of courses, and I watched a lot of courses, and I read a lot of materials. I got them read to me as well as I was driving, because I used to pound the pavement and drive up and down trying to get business to sell websites, which is really hard. And I furiously learnt from that. There's one book I read, which I always recommend to people. It's not a fancy book. It's actually an unfancy book. And there are lots of really good books like that are out there. It's called The E-Myth, and it's not fancy. It's actually really boring. But if you read that, that's the business that changed my life and taught me how to build a business, because you don't know how to build a business at the beginning. Like no one ever sat down and went, I say you build a business, how it works. But that taught me how to build a business. And I'd recommend anyone right now listening to go and do that if you want to build a business. And so what I did was I took that idea of that book. I read that book, I took that idea, and I saw someone have this comparison site, and I built a very basic one. And I just started implementing the book and building systems and processes around the business. And I just kept doing it until I replaced my whole entire self from the company. And eventually, I was no longer needed, which was kind of weird and a bit scary. But it began because, I read the book, learned the skills, and then trialed and tested a lot of things. And things either work or you learn.
Yeah.
There is no failure. Oh, no, I just think those three things combined together, read books, learn skills, and test a lot. That's how you make a company.
Fred, you mentioned there that no one taught you business. You had to read the book. What do you think of Australia's schooling system right now, and why is business not something that's more widely spoken about and taught?
That's a really good question, and I don't know exactly the inner workings of the education sort of posture. I know that the history of education came from academia, and if the industrialization era of schooling was, and it's really weird if you think about it. Why do we have years? Why do we have years of schooling? I'm in this year, you're in that year, because I'm that age and I fit in that bracket. It doesn't make any sense. Why can't someone we all work with people who are different ages than us now. So then that was because of industrialization, right? You think of it, boom, 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 like a production line. So at the end of school, 20% of people went to the electric company, 25% went to the gas company, other ones went to the mining company, and these guys went to the hospitals and things like that, right? So we need this many nurses and this many miners and this many doctors that come out the other side, and this many people are going to leave, right? So we've got a nice industrialization production queue with the thing nicely going through, and that's what education was about. It wasn't about dealing with the multidisciplinary technological production of ideas into reality to fit and meet people's needs on a global and competitive basis. That's not what it was produced for. That it was produced for when we needed to industrialize teaching, which kind of worked for a good period of time, and now is broken, I think, as you've identified. And I think I sent two of my girls to Montessori, which is a type of schooling, and in that one they have 3 years together, and I think it's brilliant. The girls' friends are like different ages of people. They're not in the same year, which actually changes their thinking. It broadens their world. I think the reason why business is hard to teach, it's not exactly. It should be taught earlier. You're right. And actually, I take that back. It's not hard to teach. It's easy to teach. It's actually really easy. I learned it from a book, so it's probably, I'm a bit old school, but in that way, it wasn't designed for that, I think is my answer. It was designed for something else.
So your daughters, where do you see, in 10, 15 years time, what do you see them doing in the future?
I think that they will use AI and tools to create. They're very creative, like unbelievably creative people. I think they will, I think value creation, it's always needed. There's always more problems. There's so many problems that need to be solved. I think the world of atoms will be the place where there will be growth, and inorganic things as well. Humans still are organic. We love, I think a lot of that stuff is still emerging and, getting clarity on and deregulating as well. I think that's where they will thrive. And I think the digital world will commodify. It'll become like the chemicals industry, we'll refer to Google and Microsoft and Apple as like the old chemical companies like Dow Corning. And it used to be the top 10 company on the S&P 500, right? Mm-hmm. You remember when chemical companies were the trend? That's what it will be like. And then the organic companies and the worlds of people, people will make materials that can repair themselves, and things which we think is science fiction will become the hot area. I think biotechnology will become massive. I think everyone's wanting to live longer. And I think that's not even really got the investment that it deserves. And I think that's where growth lives.
Fred, before we let you go, we like to end every episode by asking our guests to share a special item that maybe means something to them, or maybe it's just something in your office where you are. You don't always have to have the item. Have you got something you'd like to share with us?
I do. So, this is going to be really weird. You could imagine. I think this is probably a growth area. Okay. This is my Thai inhaler.
Okay.
It's a nasal inhaler.
Yep.
And what you do is you literally just breathe it in. It smells like menthol. It's really nice. And it's fantastic. It fits in my pocket. It's like super cool. But it's I think things like this, I think this was like $1 or less. It's really interesting because I think there are like I don't smoke, I don't drink, I don't do any drugs. And I have a really hard line of that. I'm almost 7 years now where I've not touched a single drop of alcohol, not even on a Bucks party. So what's left, right?
Yeah.
What can I do that's, because humans love to distract themselves. I think inhalers are amazing. Maybe I should launch an inhaler company. And, I think that this is menthol, right? But I think you could smell like cookies or, there are smells that people love, that really triggers people and it makes them feel nostalgia, and instead of breathing in nicotine, you maybe just want to smell something. And that's, going back to the ancient times, the Egyptians massive. The ancient Egyptians were massive on perfumes. In fact, it was one of them biggest things. People used to wear a little pot of smell on their head. And others used to carry around little jars, and other people had amulets. And so this ancient Egyptians smelled incredibly amazing. They would bury themselves as well with huge pots of perfume. So smell has always been a big thing for humanity. And my forecast is that this might be one of those, it's like when the vapes started coming out, the jewels started coming out. I think inhalers might be coming next.
Well, Fred, thank you so much for joining us. And we really appreciate your time.
Yeah, it was so great to chat.
Thanks very much, guys, as well.